Herodotus, thank you for joining us today on World Religion News. If you are new here, we are interviewing the ancient Greek philosopher Herodotus. His work has inspired many, and he has recently returned from a long trip to Persia. Now we would like to hear his opinion on the religion Zoroastrianism.
Yes, thank you for having me on the show today. I would like to show you that I am an expert on Zoroastrianism, thanks to my extensive travels in Persia.
So what is Zoroastrianism? Is it like Islam or Christianity?
Well, it is like Islam and Christianity in the sense that it is a monotheistic religion, meaning that they believe in one all-powerful God who they call Ahura Mazda, and they attribute to him the creation of the entire universe. Also, although this is not a necessary characteristic of monotheism, they believe in two destinations in the afterlife, the house of songs for the righteous, and the house of lies for the unrighteous.
Now, would you say that these concepts of the house of song and the house of lies are similar to the Christian concepts of heaven and hell?
Not quite. You see, while Christians believe that the punishment of hell is eternal, Zoroastrianism claims that eventually Ahura Mazda will conquer the forces of evil, liberating those in the house of lies to live in eternal bliss.
So, you mentioned the forces of evil here. Could you explain that a little bit more?
Yes, I will tell you as much as I can, but you should know that there's very little information available on the subject. Zoroastrianists believe that Ahura Mazda, their god, is all-powerful and perfectly good. However, and they also believe that there are many minor deities who help him in his task of spreading goodness throughout the world, and they're called the Ahuras. However, they also believe that there is an evil being called Angramainu, who has a host of helpers called Devas, and these evil spirits attempt to corrupt humanity and spread evil.
So, since this conflict between good and evil is so important to them, would you say that they're a dualistic religion?
Not quite. You see, you have to be careful with the word dualism, because dualism implies that the two sides of good and evil are equal in power, but this is not the case. Ahura Mazda is infinitely more powerful than Angramainu, and it is guaranteed that he will eventually defeat him.
Are you sure? I'm almost certain that I heard somewhere that Zoroastrianism is dualistic.
You probably did, because much of the West's initial contact with Zoroastrianism was actually through an off-branching religion called Zoroastrianism, which is much more dualistic. The two religions do have a lot in common, but there are a few key differences.
Interesting. What sort of differences are there between Zoroastrianism and Zoroastrianism?
Well, probably the biggest difference is that while Zoroastrianists believe that Ahura Mazda is all-powerful and created the entire universe, Zoroastrianists believe that the supreme deity is actually Zorvan, the god of time, and that his sons are Angramainu and Ahura Mazda.
Now you've got me confused. You started by saying that Zoroastrianism is a monotheistic religion, but now you're talking about a god of time separate from Ahura Mazda. That seems polytheistic to me.
It certainly does. You see, Zoroastrianism evolved from the original polytheistic religion of Persia, and it kept many of the original gods and goddesses. However, because Zoroastrianism adopted monotheism, it demoted these gods and goddesses to simply servants or emanations of Ahura Mazda.
So, although Ahura Mazda is only true God, he manifests his power through several lower-level gods who serve him?
Exactly.
Would you say that this dynamic is similar to the Hindu belief in many gods who all come from the one essence of Brahman?
Absolutely.
So, tell me, how did the transition from monotheism to polytheism occur?
Well, it all began with a man named Zarathustra, or in Greek, Zoroaster. When he was doing a purification ritual around the age of 30, he received a vision that drastically changed his views. He opposed the original Persian gods and spirits, calling them evil spirits, or devas. And he went around preaching his new monotheistic religion, Zoroastrianism. However, he wasn't able to convert many people until he converted the king, Vishtaspa, and after that, Zoroastrianism became the official religion of Persia.
So, what happened next?
Zoroastrianism became quite autonomous under the rule of the Seleucids. However, after the Seleucids, the Arsacids came into control, and under them they were also fairly autonomous. Although a man named Ardashir, a Zoroastrianist and a Sasanian, took over using force and religious propaganda. This began the Sasanian period under the Arsacid Empire. After the Arsacids lost control, the Islamic Arabs took over the area, and they imposed a lot of religious persecution and taxes based on religion and other restrictions that Zoroastrians had not experienced quite so intensely before. Many texts were burned and the culture diminished a lot, and many refugees fled to India, where they later became Parsis. After the Arabs, the Turks invaded and the Mongols invaded after them, and over all this time they have suffered very, very much.
You know the story of Zoroastrianism. Has the Zoroastrian culture continued into modern times?
Yes, it has. Their population in numbers is very small, but mostly concentrated in specific areas of India and Iran. In India, they're called the Parsis, which comes from the word Persian, and these people are essentially the descendants of the refugees who escaped Persia during the Islamic invasion. Those who remain in Iran today are still persecuted by the Sharia law imposed by the Iranian government.
Wow. Now, although they're a very small fraction of the population, what influence have they had?
A very strong one, actually. Zoroastrianists have influenced the Western culture as well as their own Eastern one, especially in pop culture. You can see themes from their beliefs appear everywhere. In Moby Dick, the character Fadala is a Zoroastrianist, and the Game of Thrones was actually explicitly based off of Zoroastrian mythologies. One of my favorite connections, although this is not explicitly stated, the themes of Zorvanism are very apparent in the TV show Lost, in which Jacob and the Man in Black respectively correspond to Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu.
Wow, these connections are even more amazing than the fact that you know about them, being an ancient Greek historian.
Don't ask.
Are there any dietary restrictions like halal and kosher?
Yes, according to the Zoroastrianist sacred text, they believe that although you can consume dairy products such as yogurt, cheese, and milk, you are forbidden from eating cow meat products. And this includes cows in the north, which is their way of referring to deer, moose, caribou, etc.
Do they wear any special clothing?
They do. Yes, they wear two important articles of clothing, the sudra, which is a shirt, and the kusti, which is a belt. The sudra must be put on after bathing, and it has a special V-shaped pocket called the gibron. And the gibron is supposed to be symbolically filled with good deeds. The kusti is a belt that is wrapped 3 times around the waist, and each time around the waist represents one of the 3 pillars of their religion: good deeds, good thoughts, and good words. Now, the kusti must have a prayer said as it's being put on, but the sudra can just be put on after a bath.
So, what's the prayer?
The prayer can be found in their sacred texts, the Korda Avesta. Korda is a word for God, and Avesta is an ancient Persian language. So essentially, the Korda Avesta means the language of God.
How old do they have to be to wear these clothes?
Typically, there's an initiation ceremony called Navjota around the age of 15. Navjota means newly born, and it is essentially a coming of age ceremony for Zoroastrianists. In it, the participant commits himself to the Zoroastrian creed and puts on the kusti, and the kusti renews him.
How do the good thoughts, good works, and good deeds play an important role in Zoroastrian life?
Well, they are the 3 ethical pillars of their religion, and they believe that it is by committing good deeds, thinking good thoughts, and speaking good words that they are able to combat the forces of darkness and Angra Mainyu.
What are their sacred texts?
Their sacred texts, like we said earlier, they believe in the Korda Avesta, and within the Korda Avesta, there are 17 Gathas, which are hymns supposedly written by Zoroaster himself.
Where do they pray?
For, I would say, the first 400 years of the religion's existence, followers just prayed at home. but eventually they began erecting fire temples, which became a new place of worship.
Thank you for your time, Herodotus. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure for me too. I've been happy to share a little bit about this religion and what I've learned on my extensive trip and studying. I think it's about time that I return to Athens and continue to learn and study. Have a wonderful day.